it going, everyone? And thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. This is going to be episode 10, and we are going to be discussing the latest album by Run the Jewels, RTJ4. And yeah, I'm excited to cover this one. Run the Jewels is a hip hop act that I've enjoyed through the years, ever since their inception in 2013. So yeah, before we get into this album, just wanted to let everyone know the last album was over the 1975 latest album. That album, I had quite a bit of thoughts on it. So if you're interested in the 1975's latest album, Notes on a Conditional Form, you go ahead and check that out on wherever you found my podcast. And just to update on that as well. Um, I'm distributed to a lot more platforms. Right now, I'm on big ones like iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio now, um, and then other smaller ones. And if you're always welcome to listen on YouTube as well. I have a YouTube channel just listed as The Music Reviewer. It's the same logo as the podcast. Shouldn't be too difficult to find. I upload my podcast there as well. So yeah, if you've been listening, thanks, and leave a comment if you'd like. I'd like to hear your feedback or just your thoughts on the albums that I'm reviewing as well. If you have anything you suggest that I should review, go ahead and let me know as well. So yeah, let's get into this Run the Jewels 4. So Run the Jewels is a rap group consisting of two rappers under the names Killer Mike and LP, um, of which they were already, before forming Run the Jewels, they were already rappers with their own established careers. Um, Definitely not to the scale of what Run the Jewels is today, but I believe they had their respective fan base and I guess following. Um, so um, they basically were formed in 2013 with the release of their self-titled album Run the Jewels. They met by working on each other's projects where LP produced one of Killer Mike's albums, and eventually they were just being featured on each other's music, and they went on tour. That basically blossomed to them deciding to form a rap collective or a rap group. Run the Jewels is exactly what it what is comprised of. It's just two rappers um, going as hard as they can, basically on every song, and just thriving off that chemistry. Now, I did actually enjoy Run the Jewels um, first album and their all the other releases prior to Run the Jewels 4 too as well. They are a group that I've seen live as well in 2015. I caught them at a festival, and I've always felt like they are distinguished in the hip hop genre. They definitely stick out because it's a white guy and a black guy, and they're just up there killing it. And it's cool to see in this day and age. I can't really think of any other um, hip hop duos other than Outkast, but obviously Outkast was a different era of hip hop. But it feels like uh, Run the Jewels has almost taken the torch uh, that that was probably created by Outkast for rap duos, and they have made it their own, and they have established themselves as one of the forefront front runners in hip hop today. And with their music, it's a little difficult to talk to them in comparison to their contemporaries in hip hop. They formed in the 2010s, but their success wasn't riding on the trap boom or SoundCloud rapper boom of that era. I'd say Run the Jewels' success can probably be attributed to um, probably the critical acclaim from music blogs and music critics. Um, like you never hear their music played on mainstream hip hop radio. They don't really feature many mainstream rappers in their projects. They are essentially in a lane of their own. So, going into this album and reviewing it, I had to ask myself, how can I rate this album and uh, kind of uh, rate it fairly and critique it fairly based on what they are. I can't really compare them to Drake or Travis Scott. That doesn't really make sense. I mean, on the indie radio station on Sirius XM, they play I'm sorry, they play Run the Jewels. So I kind of have to just base it off their quality of work in the past. So I'd say rating for Run the Jewels to get a positive review or to blow me away would be a lot harder than any other hip hop artist because um, I'm expecting a lot of them. Their quality of work is basically every single album. There's that baseline that it's hard for them probably to build more on what they even have because they've essentially created a sort of niche genre in hip hop that they are the front runners on. So that was uh, my main roadblock in reviewing this album. To be frank, I did enjoy it. Um, this album has everything you'd want in a Run the Jewels album. There's excellent flows. The production, um, uh, the production is great. The quirkiness and the samples that you usually expect in their songs are there. And it's even harder to review this album with the ongoing political turmoil in the world that we have going on right now with the recent killings of George Floyd and the police brutality protests that are affecting everyone. So, and obviously, Run the Jewels has that political viewpoint where they essentially they like to make it known that they are not a fan of society's treatment towards minorities, especially with Killer Mike being a black male in today's society. They've been no strangers to criticizing police brutality as well. So I am trying to keep this review um, a little bit separate from this, even though I feel like maybe this release was purposely released during this time. Um, I'm trying to just simply review this as its own body of work, and not that I want to eliminate the importance of what's going on right now. I feel like what's happening is needed, and it is certainly certainly good that there are more people waking up to what's going on. But aside from that, yeah, let's just go into this review, starting from the first track, Yankee and the Brave. So immediately with Yankee and the Brave, you get what the point that this album is trying to make. It's sort of a concept album where Killer Mike and LP are painting themselves as these characters going through society as these sort of outlaws that are still on the good side, trying to cut through the bullshit of society and essentially try to send a message out there. Yankee being Killer Mike, Brave being LP, and those are characters based on the cities they came from, New York and Atlanta. But with the music, it's an energetic track. It has this doomy, dark and eerie sort of vibe and mood. I like the hi hat and snare sample combo, and it feels like it looks it. I hear a nice little maybe bass guitar or maybe even regular guitar mixed low, playing this groove. Um, has sort of an old school style production to it. There's some weird samples in there that embellish it, and of course the flows are aggressive by Killer Mike and LP. They kill it on this one. Um, I felt like this was a good intro track. Moving on to the third song that I found, this one was interesting to talk about. Out of Sight featuring 2 Chainz. This one has a nice groove, bass guitar and guitar that are layered over each other. It hits hard. It has a nice female vocal sample. The flows are good. Like you can say that probably about every track, but I'll say it again. Um, there's a development of the track where the instrumentals, you know, they evolve a little bit. And then I feel like 2 Chainz feature, it probably could have been any other rapper, but I felt like it was solid. Um, the track right after that is quite good as well, called Holy Calamafuck. There's this weird sample at the beginning. It has this weird synth bass mixed really low, and the groove is almost reggaeton type style. It's not like a typical hip hop beat. So I felt that was pretty interesting to it. There's a dark tone to it, and eventually there's a beat switch with this really deep sub bass. This really wet snare sound dominates the track, making it even more darker. It has a mysterious mood to it. I like that song as well. And moving on to the sixth song on this album, this is probably one of the more interesting songs on this track, titled "Walking in the Snow." I think it's probably one of my favorites. Has more of this doomy, dark mood to it. Has some nice syncopated rhythmic ideas, nice melodic weird synth sounds. Uh, Best hook on the album by far. There's a nice beat switch that comes in when Killer Mike comes into the track, and it gets a little tropical too. It gives it a little bit of a tropical vibe, and then it switches again to this even more weird, funky type beat, making it spooky, dark. There's some sparkly embellishments to it. It's a fire track, um, and it, I feel like that was probably the highest point on this album. Not to say the rest of the album bad, but it definitely follows a predictability. Um, and I do like some of the other tracks, such as the one after that, Just featuring Pharrell and Zach De La Rocha of Rage Against the Machine. It has a classic Pharrell type beat to it. He's on that hook. There's like a deep sub bass. There's like a Migos type flow to it. It's a song about rebellion. There's some really good production on it, of course, with Pharrell. It's not a surprise. The hook is okay. The Zach De La Rocha feature was pretty good. I don't know really what's up with that. I don't know if he's just a fan of Run of the Jewels or he's going to be doing this more often, but he sounds like any other rapper. Like he can probably put out a hip hop album himself and he'd probably do pretty well. So that was one of the more interesting parts I found on this album. But yeah, the that's a good track as well. The next track after that, Never Look Back, or Never Looks Back. Let me see what the actual title is on that. Doesn't sound right. It's just called Never Look Back. It has this weird video game like tone on the synths that happens other parts um, of the album. I don't know if that's just a production quirk by LP or the other producers that were on there, but that definitely does happen on the album. But it keeps this more of this like doom and dark aesthetic to it. Um, the hook's a little lackluster, but the beat is interesting. It develops into a house type beat, um, or a house type hi hat in the beat, and it has like this weird futuristic, like almost sci-fi sound to it. That one's a pretty decent track. And then probably like the next and last interesting track that I like to point out on this album is Pulling the Pin featuring Josh Homme and Mavis Staples. It has this compound time signature, which I feel like this is one of the cool things about Run the Jewels as well. They're not always rapping over like straightforward 4/4 or 2/4 time signatures. This is has a little bit of a swing to it. It has quirky little synth lines on the track. Again, it's keeping this dark and doomy color in the track. There's some killer flows. One of the things I couldn't quite figure out is really what is Josh Homme doing on here. For those of you who don't know, Josh Homme is the frontman of rock band Queens of the Stone Age. Um, it sounds like he's doing some backing vocals where he's doing his little whaley Josh Homme thing. It sounds a lot like him, but I think he might even be playing guitar on this. And then I think the Mavis Staples part is just a sample. I'm not entirely sure though. Um, and yeah, that was a good track as well. And this is actually close to the end because the last track, I'll talk about it. It wasn't my favorite, but it's listed a few words for the firing squad. Um, it starts on this compound time signature as well. There's some interesting instrumentation on here. There's some symphonic composed parts with strings. There's some sax as well. It's this huge instrumental interlude with Killer Mike and LP taking turns on verses. Um, it definitely sticks out like a sore thumb, but it's dumb. But I really feel like this song is essential to tying up the album because the last end of it is just a narrator going about talking about Yankee and the Brave, which is these characters that are in this made-up TV show, and it is essentially running through the a plot point, I guess, on the show, which basically ties neatly the themes on this album, um, which essentially um, there are these two characters that are up against the world, and they're just trying to do some good. And yeah, it it's not really much of a hip hop song really to end, but it was interesting. So overall, I did enjoy this album, and the problem with this album is that upon first listen, I really did enjoy it, but what happens, I think, is the more and more I did, I couldn't help but notice that this is just another Run the Jewels album, and there's really not much more. There's not really not nothing much more different than what was on RTJ3. Uh, there's really no more development or evolution of the band. I feel like they're doing what they do best, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it got a little predictable. I felt like I was getting just more of uh, what Run the Jewels has always been doing, and I really wish there was something else that they could do in terms of maybe changing up their style, um, throwing in some wrenches in there where I'm just like, wow, I didn't expect this, and I feel like maybe this album could have surprised me a little bit more. But I don't want to let anyone think that this is a bad album. It's really good. Um, I just uh, I just wish there was something else in here that maybe could have happened that didn't happen. And another, I guess, critique would be that LP sounds a lot like Little Dicky on this album. I don't know if that's just me, but I could not shake it a lot of times when he spit out a verse. So he's still a great rapper. He's probably leagues above Little Dicky, but their vocal delivery is just so similar. Um, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. I'd say give this album a listen. Um, Even if you haven't listened to Run the Jewels, um, you'll probably end up being a fan of them if you enjoy hip hop. Um, Overall, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 with this. I really wanted to rate it higher, but I just I just only was uh, really impressed by Walking in the Snow. The rest of the songs are just good hip hop songs, but I felt like there could have been a little bit more done. Um, and yeah, we'll just leave it at that. If you made it this far into the podcast, thanks for listening. I'll be reviewing some more music soon, and you guys have a good one.